What is going on, 49er fans? We have a very special guest in the building today. We have Sacramento State offensive lineman Jackson Slater, AP first team All-American. Man, I was looking at your stats as we're getting ready for this live. Over 1,000 pass blocking snaps without giving up a sack. That's remarkable. So I'm excited to get into what this journey has been like for Jackson, his process getting to this point, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. And you guys already know what to do. Drop an SDS in the chat, smash that like button, and let's get into it all right now. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it. Jackson, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us, man. We were kind of talking about it offline. The draft is right around the corner. How are you feeling with that day staring at you in the eye, basically?
Yeah, I'm pretty relaxed. I think I can hang my hat on how I handled the process. I think, I feel pretty confident about what I put out there and how teams would feel about me. I think, I've done everything I could at this point. So, however it's going to play out is how it's going to play out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a fantastic process, at least from my perspective. And I'm excited to dive in to that with you. But when I bring guys on, I kind of like to start like at the beginning, and then we kind of work our way up until we we get ready for this draft. Someone said he looks like my brother. I could see a little bit. I can see a little bit. So when you first started this journey, like, were you always was it in your mind to play football, or were there other sports that interested you? And how did your journey to football come about?
Yeah. So really, I just kind of played the sports my friends were doing growing up. So really, I started out as on swim team and doing golf lessons were
Okay.
really the first sports I started doing. So my dad even bought like a Latin roots book, and he was like, "Okay, I don't think he's told me he's like, I didn't think you're gonna be like an athlete, so I was gonna try and make you like smart and stuff." But then my buddies played baseball and basketball, so got into those, and then kind of like fifth grade was my first year of tackle football, and was always a bigger kid, had somewhat of a natural ability, so I enjoyed going out there, and my youth teams were pretty good, so it was fun. But yeah, I mean, I would say it wasn't until like high school until I really like figured out football was like the sport I wanted to pursue. I'd say baseball was always a close second. I had fun doing that, but I wouldn't say I've ever really putting as much work into baseball as I did in football, especially, once high school rolled around. So, I wanted to focus on what I was putting my work into for sure.
So when you were going through that process of playing like Pop Warner or whatever it was, were you always an offensive lineman? Were you like the bigger kid who's like, oh, there's our left tackle right there?
Pretty much, yeah. Like O line, D line. The teams I was a part of, we didn't have like 80 kids trying to play on the 10U team or whatever.
Right.
So it was a lot of like two-way stuff, and I enjoyed just being out there playing both sides of the ball. I thought that was fun, and continued that through high school as well. Just kind of dealing with the same kind of population issues in football, I would say. But it was fun. I think it's made me a more, well-rounded player. But, I was trying to tell myself when I was younger that I wanted to be like a tight end initially. There's a guy who's on the Bengals right now, Drew Sample, who went
Yeah.
to my high school. And I thought he was like, the best thing since sliced bread, and thought he was super cool. So I was like, I want to be a tight end too. That's cool. And then was always like the fat kid kind of. So never really took the tight end route.
Yeah, they're like, no, we need you on the O line, pal. O line, D line.
Pretty
You
much,
push those streams to the back of the bus. Like that's not happening.
Yeah,
dude, that's so funny. And I know Samples. He's a really good tight end. I think he's underrated. Like he's obviously got some guys in front of him over there with the Bengals, but he's a good tight end. And again, dude, it is so hard to make it to the league, so you have to have a lot of talent. So it sounds like you kind of came out of like a small school type of area, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, like the size of the school, like I'm from Washington, so that the size of the school is actually like pretty big for Washington, but it was very, at least when I was there, like really an academically focused school, I would say. So like in high school, there's like 4A, 3A, 2A, and 4A is the biggest. So because of how big the school was, we were a 4A school, but the amount of kids we had coming to play football was like equal to a 2A school, what I heard. So, didn't have a ton of success in high school, if you could put that together, but it was still fun for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet that helped you throughout the process because again, dude, I was looking at some of your stuff in getting prepared for this. I'm like, you had 20 tackles as a senior in 4 games as a defensive lineman. I was like, that's actually not bad. Like that's really good. Like, did you ever think about playing D-line, or was your calling always the offensive line?
Yeah, it was really just like, I think I was a pretty athletic guy in the league we were in, so I could go out there and be big and play D-line too, but it was never even really a second thought to me to try and play D-line at all. So
all right, cool. So you mentioned it. You're playing 4A, so you're in the big league in high school, but you guys doesn't sound like you pump out a ton of recruits or guys. You mentioned Drew Sample, but what was your recruiting process like? Obviously, you land with Sac State. We know that.
Yeah.
But were there a lot of teams calling? Was there any D1 or was it FCS, D2, D3 kind of teams reaching out?
Mainly FCS, D2. I think a big part of it felt like kind of I was a late bloomer in high school, and I think that blooming didn't happen till COVID happened. So that kind of impacted high school recruiting at the time, as well as obviously not being a part of a program that pumps out recruits all the time. So like wouldn't say I was getting a ton of looks, but yeah, mainly a lot of like non-scholarship FCS. So like the Pioneer League, the Ivy League had some offers there. Eastern Washington gave me a partial. Central Washington, who's like the D2 in Washington, offered me. And then that would have been like a partial too. And then I had a couple PWOs to UW and Wake Forest. But Sac State kind of came in like later in the process and offered me a full ride. So kind of made it a pretty easy choice, I would say. So.
Well, it made it an easy choice, and it looks like it turned out to be a pretty darn good choice because you get there and you start 9 games in your first season at left guard. What was that transition like for you going from high school to the FCS level?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty seamless overall. I thought I had a really good trainer in Washington who trained Josh Connerly too at the time. So it's kind of funny that we're coming out at the same time and both offensive linemen that trained under this guy.
You guys were teammates at the Senior Bowl, right? Like
we were on different teams at the Senior Bowl actually. Okay. But yeah, it's been cool to see him along the way. And Marcus Abbott is this trainer's name, who's now kind of in like the Costa Mesa area of California. And I think he did a really good job of, there's a couple other guys that train with us too that are playing college football right now. And He did a really good job of preparing us for the next level, the conditioning piece, the working out piece, the consistency, technique, like all that stuff really helped me, show up to Sac State and be ready to roll. And, initially kind of started out as like a swing guard, swing tackle type of guy, like utility piece that would bounce around. And then, my goal for that year was to just make the travel roster, and did that after fall camp. So I was like, great, get some experience. A lot of these guys are going to graduate ahead of me, and hopefully put myself in a position to play next year. And college football happened. There's injuries. One thing leads to another, and they say you're our best option. So I went out there and felt confident in my ability, and I think having to do that at such a young age helped me grow a lot quickly. And it was really, really cool experience for sure. So
Yeah, because that's nuts. Like true freshman, you're thrust in, you start 9 games, and you guys do pretty well, especially with one of the running backs that you had. I'll get to that guy in a second.
there you go.
But then you go into your next year, and you stick at left guard, and
Mhm.
you play 11 games at left guard,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're in the playoffs playing left tackle. Was that another injury situation where they're just like, Jackson, we need you to play left tackle? And what was that transition like for you guys?
Yeah, pretty much another injury deal. So our longtime starting left tackle, Troy Stiefel, who caught the injury bug like later in his career. And, I think if he didn't, he'd probably be in the league right now, in my opinion. But,
That's rough, man.
injuries happen. And
Right.
he, I think, tore his meniscus or something in his knee. So he was down for the playoffs. So, our Coach Richardson does a good job of putting the best lineup he can out there. And I feel like I also do a good job of, being an option at any spot. And, he felt like putting me at left tackle was the best lineup he could make there. So I went out there, it's harder than you would think to, even though it's late in the season to bump out, and you've been playing guard all year, and now you say, okay, you got to play tackle, you got to learn all these angles. I knew the playbook well, but again, it's like all the techniques are still that much different to where it's not the easiest thing in the world. But I felt like I was ready to play in those playoff games, and I think overall did a good job filling in when needed. So
Yeah, I can definitely rationalize that because I played some center and guard back in the day. So I know that bumping out to tackle is like a different world. You're on an island a lot of the time, right?
Mhm.
When you're on the interior, you're combo blocking with your tackle or your center a lot in the run game. Your sliding protections, so you do get manned up, big on big sometimes,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of time. It's more just like passing guys off and working together with the guy. When you're when you're the tackle, you're on an island sometimes where it's just
Sure.
like, good luck, Jackson, go block that guy.
Yeah.
So did you feel like if you look back on it now, did because you didn't play that much tackle throughout your career, but did those 2 games kind of like, I don't know, did it give you a little bit more juice, a little bit more confidence of like, especially when you kicked back inside, like, yeah, I can do this even at a higher level, knowing just what I learned in those 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think for me, it's like just attacking wherever I'm playing with confidence. And,
Mm.
it's like, okay, I'm at tackle now. Take a couple days to get used to it. And it's like, okay, yeah, I can go play tackle. And then when you kick back inside, it's like, okay, I haven't done this in a while. I've been at tackle. So now I'm going back inside. It's like, pretty sure I still know how to do this. And, take a couple days to get used to it. And you're like, yeah, this is good. I like this better. And for me, it's always, whatever job is assigned to me is the one I like best. So it's
Yeah, I
like
like
when I was at tackle, I wasn't like, oh man, I wish I could go back to guard. It was like, there's actually some fun stuff you can do at tackle. And, when you go back to guard, it's like, oh yeah, I like this stuff better at guard. And so it's kind of funny to compare and contrast. And But I'm happy that that's kind of how my brain works, and it's like, I'm not like, I don't know, mad about it, and I'm just like,
Right.
yeah, let's go play this position. That could be fun. So, yeah, it's funny.
Well, absolutely. And then, like, too, you guys look at what you guys did in 2022.
Mhm.
School record over 3,000 rushing yards and 36 rushing touchdowns. That sounds like an offensive lineman's dream.
Oh yeah,
Just being able to produce like that. And obviously, for those who don't know, Cam Scataboo was your running back at that time, if I'm
yeah,
not mistaken, correct?
yep,
So what was it like blocking for that guy? Because obviously we've seen what he's capable of at
yeah.
ASU. And he's a lot of 49er fans love Cam Scataboo.
Yeah.
So what was it like blocking for that guy?
Yeah, it was. I mean, he made our job very easy a lot of the time, and you always want a really powerful runner behind you, where it's like, when you do get all the blocks right, you got a guy that can make a guy miss at the second level, can run over a corner, can get those extra yards that kind of help you out as an offensive line that keeps you moving down the field, not having to grind for each first down and stuff. So I think that was the biggest thing I noticed was where even if we messed up or something happened, he'd still, fight like hell for yards. And those are the type of backs you love blocking for. I think, at Sac State, we've done a really good job with the backs here. Marcus Fulcher was another guy on that team that, had a lot of carries as well, who was, same type of runner, same type of guy. Asher O'Hara was our quarterback, we were in a kind of dual quarterback system at that point. And, we had Jake Dunaway, who was, I'd say more the cerebral guy, would make the right reads, throw some bombs, and then Ash would come in. He could sling it too, but he was more of our, QB power guy, QB counter guy that would come in and, have some good plays. So I think the whole offense gelled really well together. And, once you get that rolling, it's hard to stop it. So it was a fun year.
Can you talk about the relationship between a running back and the offensive lineman in regards to setting up blocks? I think some people just see it as, oh, the offensive lineman made the block or he didn't make the block, but there is a relationship, right, with the running back, because I think of a running back who has the ball like a magnet, right?
Sure.
Wherever he goes, that's the angle that the defender is going to take, right?
Mhm.
So a running back can really work in tandem with his blockers when he's held, he uses those angles to set guys up like you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. I was gonna say, I think it's just goes back to working as a team, and there's a lot of trust that comes with it too. I think so. It's my whole thing is just understanding the goal of each play. So if we're running pin and pull, if we're running power, it's okay. Find your offensive lineman and get behind him, and that's the guy that's going to help you get more yards. Understanding the timing of stuff. What's your aiming point on inside zone? What's your aiming point on duo? And then, once you get all that stuff covered, then it's okay, trusting that each guy at each spot's going to do the right thing and, make the play successful. So I think a big part of it is just chemistry and being able to gel as a unit, between an offensive line and a running back. And, I think out of my career there, that was definitely one of the years where you could really see a difference and, how that stuff was handled for sure. So.
Do you have a preference in what type of scheme you like to run? Gap scheme, outside zone, inside zone, or do you feel like you fit into both of those? Because obviously they use a little bit differentiating concepts.
Sure.
But do you feel comfortable in both, being able to run both?
Yeah, I do. I see myself as a pretty versatile offensive lineman. I think I have the athleticism to be a wide zone guy, but I think, I have the power to be a gap scheme guy too. And,
Yeah.
the good stuff in gap schemes is, being a puller and being able to get out in space, which I enjoy too.
I
Um,
love that.
so, I think I can do well in both. I think it's just, hopefully going to a team that, is the right fit for me and my abilities. And, I'm excited to see how it shakes out for sure.
Yeah, I had the privilege of being able to talk to you after I think one of the Senior Bowl
Yeah.
practices, and you had mentioned that you could see yourself being a center at the next level.
Yeah.
Do you still kind of see that? Like, have you gotten feedback from teams? Are they like, yeah, obviously, I think in the NFL, like especially interior offensive linemen, you got to play all three spots, right?
Yeah.
Left guard, right guard, and center. But do you still kind of feel like that from at least the teams that you've talked to? They kind of get a sense like, you know, center could be a real spot for you at that next level.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I'd say I would probably guess a lot of teams see me as that kind of swing guard center type of guy and kind of see what the best fit is. But I do think personally, like if I have time to grow in an offense and really learn the ins and outs of an offense, I think, and then also, I mean, just learn the techniques of center and get more reps at that. I agree. I think I could be a really good center in this league, but I'd say at this point, I think it's, just depends on where teams see me and then going in and attacking, whatever spot they want me to play. So,
Yeah, definitely. I know in Kyle's scheme that, it's definitely evolved over the years. It really started out outside zone heavy. They do integrate gap scheme. So like it's kind of like a little bit of everything.
yeah,
But he does have his centers call out protections. Do
right.
you feel comfortable in being able to identify and call protections as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff comes fairly easy to me, especially, been doing a lot of these Zoom calls with offensive line coaches, and a lot of them install their 6-man pro. And, you kind of learn that, okay, I can pick this up pretty quick. And you also learn a lot of the protection stuff is fairly similar around the league.
Mhm.
So for me, it's, I think it's just going to come down to playbook and film study that really, I think, makes or breaks a good center. And, if you're a guy that understands the playbook well and then understands the looks you're going to get, I think, you're probably going to do pretty good. So, I feel pretty confident in that stuff for sure.
Any chance one of those Zoom calls included Chris Forster of the 49ers by chance?
They did not. So
Oh,
I haven't had a ton of communication,
come on.
to be honest, but, there'll be teams that don't talk to you and then end up drafting you. So,
100%.
out.
We did that with Ricky Pearsall last year. He explained the story. He's like, I maybe had a 15-minute conversation with the 49ers like at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
And that was it. No Zooms, no formals,
Yeah.
informals, no 30 visit, nothing. They drafted him in the first round. So,
Yeah.
I'm almost of the mindset, because information, right, is like such a big thing in media coverage, right? So it's like we're out here like, oh, who visited, who's having this, who's having, talking to that person. Sometimes it's like, well, if you really like a guy, it almost suits you best to act like you don't like the guy. And wherever you land is wherever you land. But like you said, you never know how this process is going to play out. So I'm really interested. But I'm a big fan of your game. And when you look at your whole career at Sac State, you finish as like we talked about, first team AP All American. You get a Shrine Bowl invite, you get a Senior Bowl invite. And when did it like really click that you're like, dang, I might really have a chance to be in the league, because everyone, I want to say everyone, I would say the typical fan is going to have a perception of an FCS lower level school player. I'm of the mindset I don't care what the decal is on your helmet. You can either play or you can't, and players come from all walks of life and every corner of this football landscape. So when was like the first time it like clicked for you? Like, dang, I could actually be an NFL player.
Yeah, I think, I wouldn't say I was always expecting it at Sac State, but it was like, I got to go in, my sophomore year, have a good year. I got to have a good year my junior year, and then got to have a good senior year, and then we'll kind of see what the outlook is at that point. I'd say when agents started hitting me up leading into my senior season, I was like, okay, like, might have been doing some good stuff, and I got people reaching out, and that whole spiel. But I think probably after the Senior Bowl was when I really felt like confident that I belong with this group of guys, I would say. And that, I'm just as good as, anyone in this draft, I feel like. And, I'd say that was kind of when my personal confidence about, being in the NFL really was there. Because before then it was like, felt like I was a guy that did the right stuff. But again, coming from an FCS school, it's like, how do I really compare to all these other players out there? I don't really know. So I'd say that was kind of when I felt like I belonged. But, I'd say my senior year was kind of when I was like, yeah, feel like I got a pretty good shot at this. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so.
That's pretty cool. I see a comment here in the chat. Ask Jackson about the 30-30-30 club. And if that's Dad, shout out Dad in the chat. What is the 30-30-30 club?
So at my pro day, I was talking to a scout from the Colts, and he told me about what the 30-30-30 club was. And we had taken the Wonderlic before the pro day. And he said the 30-30-30 club is 30 plus on the Wonderlic, 30 plus vert, and 30 plus bench. I did 31 on bench at the combine. I jumped 32.5 at the pro day, and then I got 36 on my Wonderlic test. So, yeah. So, thanks, Dad.
They got a club for it, exclusive.
Yeah, I guess.
So, is that for like offensive linemen specifically? I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely an offensive
because it's the bench, right? You want like typically if you're getting over 30 reps on bench, you're offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. If you're jumping over 30, offensive lineman or defensive lineman.
Yeah.
And then obviously, you got to be smart to play offensive line, especially at the next level, right? Because like you mentioned it, dude, they're throwing so much at you. They're disguising everything. They're one of the things that the 49ers ran into a bunch last year was they would overload one side. So they would key the protection call to slide to the overload side. Then they would drop out like 2 or 3 defenders on the overload. And then they would bring opposite side number. So they caught a sliding protection to the weak side. And so they weren't bringing more than 4.
Yeah.
But it looked like they were showing 6, 7, 8 at the beginning of the snap. And then we were getting bad numbers on the backside, basically, which was scheming a free rusher, right?
Yeah.
And so like, how would you counteract that? Like, how would you process that? I mean, that might be a hard example because to me, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't know what the answer is, like, because I don't think the 49ers were having a hard time with it because they kept finding themselves in that spot. So it's not like an easy answer at all, but it's like, how do you process that? Like, you only have so much time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I think it goes back to the film study piece, which is something, I think I still need to work on and hopefully can find a good vet that has a good film study, strategy. But, I would say I think goes down to situational awareness and as well as, what do these teams like to bring in, probably 3rd and long or something, 2nd and long. What are the pressures? Is this a sim pressure team is kind of what we would call that, where it's like, looks like, you're bringing something, but you're still really just bringing 4 guys. So I think understanding it's going to be a sim pressure week, as well as, okay, if they're going to overload this side, they usually drop those guys and, bring someone on the week. So I think it's just situational awareness, and then also, playing the odds, I think, too, because I'm sure they probably run pressures out of that look as well. But,
Right.
depending on the team, I think you just got to play the odds and say, okay, 60% of the time it's going to be a sim pressure and they're going to drop. Okay, we're still going to slide it weak and see what happens. And, if you get it wrong, hopefully you got a quarterback that can get it out quick, and, that solves all your problems. So,
Right. It's really helpful when the hot's built into the play and they know
right.
exactly where to go the second they see the free rusher. They're like, all right, we're not even going to make the read. Here's the hot.
Yeah,
Boom.
sure.
That helps quite a bit. So I really like that answer. It's basically, a lot of it is right, because you can't always find the answer. Sometimes
Right.
you have to use judgment call, right? To be
No
like,
doubt.
this feels like they've simmed a couple pressures. This feels like this might be the one where they try to overload us and catch us right in that trend, right?
Sure.
So I actually really like that answer. I think that's a solid answer. So I kind of want to hop back into the Senior Bowl. Just want to double check. We're 30 in. Are you good
Yeah,
for
we're good.
more questions? All right,
Yeah.
cool. I'm noticing that when I have an offensive lineman on, I tend to run long because we end up having these tangent conversations about breaking down protections
Yeah.
and things like that. I can't really do that with, wide receivers or, defensive ends, but I love offensive line play. So I love
Yeah.
to really just, how do you think about this stuff? And
Sure.
it's really cool. So we talked about the Senior Bowl. We talked about the outcome of the Senior Bowl. For me, I knew who you were heading into the Senior Bowl,
Yeah.
but it was really it was like almost like just radar. You're on my radar, and I wanted to see for myself.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, for whatever that's worth, I was like, oh, he's like every box, right? You have all these boxes that you want guys to check.
Right.
And I'm like, check, 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 run game, pass blocking, all of this stuff, man. And one of my favorite matchups of that whole week was you versus Walter Nolan. Dude, Walter Nolan was I think he was number 1 recruit coming out of high school in the entire nation at defensive tackle. He's a guy that's, been mocked to the 49ers at pick 11.
Yeah.
And, you're the FCS kid. Oh, here's the FCS kid coming in. Let's see how he does. Man, you guys battled. It was one of my favorite battles, like whether it was in team, whether it was one-on-ones. You won a good portion of those reps. I'm sure there's times where he probably got you, and that's just the nature of playing the position.
Sure.
But man, like, was that a matchup that stood out to you from that week?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just happened to work out that we were going against each other quite a bit. But I think for me, it's like, was kind of a piece of that week that kind of helped with my confidence as a player, as well as, I think also was a big growing week in the fact that, like, helped me move on from bad plays as well. So it's like, I was like, okay, you're going against a guy that's a first round pick. You're probably not going to win 100% of the reps, that occur. And football's such an imperfect sport. So I think doing stuff like that, where it's like, I can play. I'm not just getting, thrown around by this guy, but also, if I do have a bad rep, it's okay. What did I do wrong there? And just moving on, because now everyone's good at football. So I think it was a huge week in my growth, just in confidence in who I am as a player, as well as, I think growing in the fact that just acceptance, I think, of, win or lose, accepting the outcome, and then, doing what you can to improve on it, for sure. So.
No, I really do appreciate that, because like my son, he's 12 years old, he's dabbling with the quarterback position a little bit, right? And it's like, it's so easy to make a mistake, right? Because you nailed it. Football is an imperfect sport.
Right.
So trying to be perfect in an imperfect situation can make someone crazy, or it can compound negative plays, right? Because if you go into the next play just like, oh, I just got cooked on that last play. I don't want to get cooked again. I don't want this to happen. Don't want it's almost like you kind of invite that into that next rep.
Yeah.
And it sounds like for you, like a big part of that mentality is wipe it, move on to the next. Even if you have a great rep too, right? You have to kind of just wipe it and
Right.
move on. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. No doubt. Because I think, I mean, coming from the FCS and Sac State, it's like I felt like, okay, if I do want to go to the NFL, you have to play perfect football because I'm coming from a lower level. And so, like, when I would, give up a pressure or, wouldn't sustain a run block well, then I was like, well, fuck, like, gotta, fix that. Like, that's going to be on film. Now I have to play the rest. I can't do anything wrong the rest of the game because that's on film. When it's like, you know what? It's like, I think, I wish I would have had this kind of growing moment earlier in my career where, I think would allow me to play with a lot more confidence than I did at some points. And, but I'm excited to kind of see how it continues to play out and grow in the NFL for sure. But I'm glad I had it before I got there, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that you think that your best ball is actually ahead of you than what you've done so
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that for sure.
Man, I love it. I don't know, like, so we've been having a couple prospects on the last couple weeks,
Yeah.
and somehow, some way, we have landed on a very similar type of guy. And you fit this mold of guys who are just like you're on the the curve up, right? Like you're an ascending player
Yeah.
where I really do believe, like when I look at your game, because we talked about it with the other prospects too. We're not only evaluating who you are right now, we're evaluating who we think you can be in 3 years from now.
Right.
We're evaluating what you would look like in an NFL system with, maybe a mentor or two, with NFL coaching, with the
Yeah.
NFL weight program, and multiple years in that type of environment. Then what does that guy look like, right?
Right.
And it just seems like for you, like you're just scratching the surface, man. It's like you went to a high school, wasn't a strong high school powerhouse, wasn't heavily recruited, go FCS. You get thrown to the fire right away and you have a ton of success early. But again, like we've talked about, it's like, can I play at the next level? Can we play at the NFL level? And it just sounds like this whole process for you has just really just solidified you every step of the way in this
Yeah.
process. And that's got to be a good feeling, right? Like knowing that one, it's an imperfect sport, and there's a pressure to be as perfect as possible, but feels like there's a lot more in your journey left.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's been like a lot more learning moments throughout this pre-draft process than I would have thought. And I think you learn a lot about who you are as a person and a player during it too, because there's so much, like dissection of, how you play football, what's your film, okay,
This guy's undrafted free agent. He can't play in the league.
Yeah. And I think, I've learned a lot about what I do good. And I think I've also learned a lot about what I do bad. And I think the stuff I do bad is a lot of fixable technique stuff, in my opinion.
Yep.
But I think really the foundation of who I am and what I'm about and what I can bring to a team, I think, I would hope every team in the NFL sees that and wants to bring that to their organization. But, I think I still have a lot to learn. I think, the NFL is obviously a way different game than college football. And, even just the facilities that I've been to and, what their O-line coaches are about, what they're teaching. It's different than college football, but I think it's a lot of stuff that I think would help me grow as a player. And I'm excited to kind of see who that guy is in a year or two for sure. So
Yeah, dude, I love to hear it. And it's like also kind of in that same mindset, man, getting a combine invite, being able to continue to showcase again, because I'm sure the process, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit, everyone's comparing everyone to everything. Like, and as a player, I'm sure you're not trying to compare yourself to others. I'm sure it
right.
happens naturally, like, oh, how's that guy look, or what is this guy doing? But at the same time, it's like you got to focus on the controllables, right? I can
Yeah.
only control this. I can control my effort and the work that I put in. So when you go to the combine, and have you heard of the relative athletic score?
Yeah.
So when you see that you have one of the highest RAS scores since they've started tracking this in 1987,
Yeah.
you ranked 141st out of 1,583 offensive guards in your athletic testing score. And it's basically a composite grade of height, weight, and the bench, which you didn't do at the combine, right? You did at
Or I did
the,
it. Fine.
he has it as a blank, but that's where you did over 30, right?
Yeah.
So that might actually bump your score up even more, but they got your vertical, your broad, your 40, 20-yard, and 10-yard split again. And I even saw like a next gen stat thing where it was like you were ranked 5th out of the top athleticism scores out of every prospect at
Sure.
the combine. Is that just another confidence boost?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, again, I think honestly throughout this whole process, I haven't really been big on comparing. I think in the past I have been a big comparing guy, and what I do and what does someone else do. But I think, this for me, this whole process has just been doing the absolute best that I can do and everything. And I think I've done a great job of that. And always felt pretty confident about my athletic testing stuff. So I'd say it all kind of lines up for how I was feeling going into the process for sure.
That's awesome. Have any teams kind of given you a sense of like where they think you'll be drafted?
Yeah, it's like still, kind of a spectrum. I'd say majority is round 4. There's a couple 3s, a couple 5s. So it kind of just depends on who you ask, but I feel confident in saying I'm like a mid-round guy, somewhere in there, depending on who really fell in love with me, I guess. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, no, I agree. That seems like the sweet spot for you. I think again, it depends on. It only takes one team, right, to
Yeah,
be like, yeah, we like this guy. We want him. We don't want to lose out on him.
right.
And again, it's just like it's almost like a game of chicken sometimes in the draft.
Mhm.
Like we think we can get this guy if we wait a whole round, and it's like
Right.
it's just almost like playing the game. I remember Quinn Miners. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
him
yeah,
and his game. We had him on the channel, and I'm like, dude, you look like a first round talent to me, but we don't know how that all works out, right? He was a smaller school, a D3 guy,
yeah,
right? Almost similar conversation, like just talking about the process of believing and like recognizing, like, yeah, I do belong here, I do fit
yeah,
here. He went in the 3rd round,
yeah.
right? He's all pro
Right,
now, right? So it's just like, the draft slot doesn't necessarily define you.
right.
It's just an opportunity, right?
Yeah,
That's
no,
all you need. Once you get on a team, it's time to go to work. And it sounds like you have that mentality to be able to handle that. It's like wherever you get drafted sounds like it's going to be a blessing for you
no
and
doubt.
your family for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome, man. Well, I do appreciate your time. I'm going to get you out here on this last question since you are an
Okay,
offensive lineman.
okay.
Do you have a preferred pre or post game meal?
Um, Not really. Just because I haven't, like at Sac State, we'd get barbecue pregame, which
It's not a bad pregame.
it's like all right, but I wouldn't say I'm like I need to have it every game.
Right.
And then post game they mix it up. So we'll see kind of what superstitions I get into in the NFL, and what do I need to do each week in order to be successful. So we'll see.
Did you have any like superstitions? Like, do you have like you have to do this pregame routine? Like, do you have anything like that, or do you just kind of have a pregame routine?
I'd say I just kind of have one, but I think if I don't stick to it, I'd feel off for sure. We usually wouldn't have a ton of time to go out on the field as an offensive line, so the pregame routine was really figuring out how to get your knee braces and pads on before you have to go out with the centers and stuff.
Yeah.
But it worked for me. I thought help me play loose before the game, and but I would guess that's going to change in the NFL. So we'll see what it evolves into.
Were you one of the guys who like takes a nap before like the pregame to like calm down, or listen to some music, or just like try to get yourself amped up? There's so many different. It's always
Yeah,
funny to see how which guy goes through that, like, because you got to flip that mindset, right? You're
right.
going to war, so it's like, how did like what's your mindset when you're getting ready for that?
Yeah, I was a big like 80s rock guy,
Okay.
listening to music wise before a game, and then I think for me, I was a big smelling salt guy pregame too. I'd always rip some. I guess I'd say that would be my superstition is I'd have to do smelling salts before you run out of the locker room. That's kind of the one I stuck with. But I think I just kind of got hyped up, like putting on all my gear and stuff and feeling like, this is like what you're putting on to go out in a battle type of thing. And, I think I did a good job of sticking with that, in my career for sure.
I've never gotten a chance to do smelling salts.
No,
Can you what? Because it's just like just wake you up. Like, well, can you
pretty
explain?
much. Yeah, it's like I don't know if I could describe it, but it's like
It's like an
it's
energy
just
jolt
it's like
for your brain.
yeah, like it's like something in your central nervous system, just like I don't know.
Shocks the system. You're like,
Yeah, but like
oh, all
going.
right, we're ready.
Yeah, basically. So they're fun for sure.
All right. So what I'm gonna do before my next interview is I'm gonna get some smelling salts, and
There you go.
I'm gonna take a rip before, see what happens.
There you
Could either
go.
be good, could either be an absolute disaster, but
Yeah.
we're gonna find out, man. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I'm a big fan of getting to know guys throughout this process, right?
Yeah.
Because it can get, I don't know, I don't want to say monotonous, but like we're so focused on the height, weight, speed, we're focused on the film,
Right.
and that's only like one part of it, right?
Right.
And so it's really cool to kind of, you know, be able to reconnect with you, be able to kind of learn a little bit more about you, man. And again, I'm a big fan of your game. I see the vision, I see the trajectory that you have in front of you. And so if it's with the 49ers, obviously we would be ecstatic. But you know what? Even if it's with the Seattle Seahawks, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say might be your hometown team, maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, really quick. How cool was that to go on a visit to the
Yeah, I
team?
mean, it was
You
sweet.
room for?
You grow up, I'd go to the training camp practices and get autographs and stuff. And
So that was full circle.
yeah. And then I also played Little League Baseball with John Schneider's son, Jack, who's the GM. So there's a lot of
they
like,
know you.
yeah, he said I talked to him and he was, like, hey, it's really cool you're on our board and stuff because, kind of go back a little bit and, kind of those little connections. There's even been some Sac State connections I've met along the way. My mom's boyfriend actually knew a scout at the Colts, so I took a 30 visit to that I met him. And so all those fun connections are really cool when they happen for sure. And it's like, oh, this guy, I know that, blah, blah, blah. And it's really fun. So
Right. And I don't want to block you from getting drafted by your childhood team at all, but
sure.
John Lynch, if you're listening. Just kidding. I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for hopping on again. Wherever you're going, man, I'm gonna follow your career. Excited to see what comes of it, and I'll be rooting for you every step along the way. So, whether it's with the Niners, even if you're wearing a Seahawks helmet, I mean, one of my all-time favorite draft crushes is Abe Lucas, the right tackle.
Yeah.
He came out of Washington State. I love that guy.
Yeah.
So I'll if you're wearing another helmet, I'll still be rooting. But again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, man, and good luck on this journey, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Definitely. I'm gonna talk with the folks for a little bit. Feel free to drop out, but appreciate you, man, as
Alrighty.
always. And have a good one.
You too.
All right. Peace. All right. Another one. I don't know if you guys have been, following along with our kind of, I don't even know if I want to call it a series, but like like these interviews. We keep coming on to the same kind of guy. And I'm low key fascinated by it, but I love it. Like I really do. Because I feel like every guy that we're getting on here, they might not be a household name yet. They might not be a guy that played big time Power 5. We've had a couple FCS guys on. We've had, we had Essa, Washington State, guys like that. Ahmed from Boise State. I mean, that's big time football, but we've had guys from like all kind of different walks. And there's this like a pretty awesome theme is that, I've typically asked this question, do you think your best ball is ahead of you? And based on all their kind of past the football, it just all feels like they're all just scratching the surface of what they can be capable of and fit Jackson right into that mix. I've been pretty adamant about how I feel about him. He strikes me as a guy who could be a starter for 8+ years in the NFL playing center. And just a guy that, I love the note from his dad, the 30-30-30 club, and scoring 36 on his Wonderlic. That's pretty impressive. So not only is he an athletic guy from an offensive lineman standpoint, but he's smart. And man, you talk about what you need to be at center, especially in a Kyle Shanahan scheme, like he talked about. He loves to pull. He's comfortable in gap scheme. He's comfortable in zone concepts. So just saying, man, I was really hoping that when I asked him, like, do you have any Zoom calls with Chris Forrester? He said, no. I was like, dang it. Because I think he would be a great center on our on our team. I think it'd be a great value. And again, like I said, he's a guy that has a lot of good football ahead of him. So I'm really excited for it and to see what he's able to do. But I appreciate him. I appreciate his time, and great guy. Love the interview, and always fun to geek out about offensive line. Definitely a trend. I definitely run longer with the offensive lineman for sure. Johnny says, to me, it's him or Gray Zabel that fit our scheme so well. Gray's like the hot, like he would be considered, because he's gonna have like the first round grade on him. But I think he's just as good as Gray. Gray's definitely super, super good as well. But hey, we'll see. We'll see. I hope the 49ers heard, though, that the Seattle Seahawks seem to be pretty interested in our guy Jackson. So just saying. But I appreciate everyone for tapping in on this one. I might have a prospect or two at the beginning of next week. I will be flying out to Green Bay on Tuesday to go cover the draft. So I'm excited about that. That's going to be a first for me. And I'm definitely excited to get out there, get boots on the ground, and hopefully have a chance to interview the 49ers first round draft pick when they select him. So it is going to be interesting, but let me know what you guys think about everything. Make sure you smash that like button, and I'll see you guys later. Peace. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to